Let me begin with a simple question. Have you noticed that the loudest rooms are often filled with the most confused people, and the quietest corners are occupied by the wisest souls? When a man reaches 50 or 60, something magical happens. Not dramatic, not visible, but deeply transformational. Let me start with a small observation. Have you noticed how, as we grow older, life slowly stops shouting at us and starts speaking softly? In our younger years, we chase noise. We think happiness is loud, dramatic, full of excitement. But somewhere around 50 or 60, if a person has lived consciously, something changes inside. The heart becomes quieter, and the mind becomes clearer. At this stage of life, many wise men begin to step back from relationships, and people misunderstand them. They say, "He is lonely, he is afraid, he has given up on love." But the truth is very different. Wisdom does not run away from love, it simply stops running after confusion. A man who has lived long enough has seen patterns repeat themselves. He has seen how emotions rise like waves and fall just as quickly. He understands that not every smile means happiness, and not every connection means companionship. With age, he realizes that peace is not something you find in another person. It is something you protect within yourself. And once peace becomes precious, he becomes careful about who he allows into his inner world. There is also a deep understanding of energy. When you are young, you feel you have endless strength. You can argue, explain, adjust, and still wake up smiling the next day. But later in life, energy becomes sacred. A wise man begins to ask a simple question: does this relationship nourish me, or does it drain me? If a connection demands constant emotional effort without offering understanding, he gently steps away. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with maturity. Another beautiful shift happens at this age. The need for validation slowly disappears. Earlier, appreciation from others felt like oxygen. Now, self-acceptance feels sufficient. A wise man no longer needs someone to tell him who he is. He has sat alone with his thoughts long enough to know himself. And when you are comfortable with your own company, you stop entering relationships just to escape silence. Freedom also takes on a new meaning. It is no longer about doing whatever you want, it is about living without unnecessary explanations. Some relationships, even loving ones, start feeling like emotional negotiations. Why are you quiet today? Why do you enjoy solitude? Why don't you feel the same excitement anymore? A wise man understands that growth changes priorities. He chooses a life where he can breathe without justification. And finally, understand this clearly: stepping back from relationships does not mean rejecting love. It means understanding love more deeply. Wisdom teaches detachment, not coldness. It teaches appreciation without attachment, care without control. Such men are not broken by past experiences, they are shaped by them. So if you see a man after 50 or 60 who walks alone, calm and content, do not pity him. He may have discovered something rare, a relationship with his own peace. And once you experience that peace, you realize something profound: you are never alone. You are simply complete. Let me share something very gentle, yet very powerful. As life moves forward, it slowly removes the unnecessary noise. In the early years, we collect people, experiences, and emotions like trophies, believing that more means better. But with time, wisdom teaches us a quieter lessons: less can actually feel fuller. When a man reaches 50 or 60, if he has been attentive to life, he begins to value depth over display, calm over chaos. Many such men are often misunderstood. When they choose distance over attachment, people assume they are wounded or disappointed. But maturity does not always come from pain. Sometimes it comes from understanding. After years of giving, adjusting, compromising, and caring, a wise man learns to listen to himself. He realizes that every relationship carries responsibility, and not every responsibility is meant to be carried forever. There is a clear shift in how emotions are handled. Earlier, emotional intensity felt exciting. Arguments felt like passion. Now, emotional stability feels far more attractive. A wise man understands that love should feel like rest, not like constant effort. If a relationship demands continuous explanation of his silence, his space, or his simplicity, he gently withdraws. Not because he lacks love, but because he respects harmony. With age also comes the awareness of time. When you are young, time feels endless. You can afford to waste it on misunderstandings and emotional drama. Later in life, time becomes visible. Each morning feels valuable. Each peaceful evening feels like a blessing. A wise man begins to ask himself whether a relationship adds meaning to his time or steals calm from it. This awareness naturally makes him selective. Another beautiful change is the relationship with loneliness. What once felt like emptiness slowly transforms into solitude. And there is a huge difference between the two. Loneliness hurts because it seeks company. Solitude heals because it enjoys presence. A man who has learned to sit quietly with himself no longer fears being alone. He discovers that silence can be deeply nourishing. Freedom at this stage becomes deeply internal. It is no longer about independence from people, but independence from expectations. Some relationships come with emotional contracts that demand consistency, excitement, and constant engagement. A wise man understands that human beings evolve. If a connection does not allow growth, it slowly becomes a burden. Choosing freedom then becomes an act of self-care. Most importantly, wisdom softens the heart. These men do not avoid relationships out of bitterness. They carry gratitude for every connection that shaped them. They remember love with a smile, not resentment. They understand that attachment often creates suffering, while appreciation creates peace. So when a wise man after 50 or 60 chooses simplicity over complexity, silence over noise, and peace over passion, it is not a loss. It is a victory of awareness. He has learned that the most stable relationship one can ever build is with inner peace. And once that bond is strong, life feels complete, with or without companionship. Let me invite you to reflect on something very subtle. Life has a beautiful way of teaching us lessons without announcing them. In the beginning, it pushes us into experiences, into relationships, into emotions that feel overwhelming. We learn by involvement. But as the years pass, life starts teaching us by distance. A man who reaches 50 or 60 has already lived through many chapters. He has loved, lost, trusted, adjusted, and let go. And somewhere along the way, understanding replaces urgency. At this stage, many wise men appear to slow down in relationships. People often think it is because they have stopped believing in love. But in reality, they have stopped believing in illusions. They no longer confuse intensity with intimacy. They have seen how excitement fades, how expectations grow, and how misunderstandings quietly exhaust the heart. One of the biggest shifts that happens with age is the relationship with peace. Earlier, peace was something we hoped to find after everything else was settled. Now, peace becomes the starting point. A wise man does not ask, "Will this relationship make me happy?" He asks, "Will this relationship disturb my inner balance?" If the answer is unclear, he pauses. Not everything that feels good in the moment feels right in the long run. There is also a deeper understanding of emotional responsibility. Relationships are not just about affection, they are about availability, attention, and presence. A man who has lived long enough understands that his emotional energy is finite. He cannot pour himself endlessly without refilling. So he chooses connections that feel natural, not demanding, where silence is not misunderstood and space is not seen as distance. Another important realization is about identity. In the earlier years, relationships often shape who we think we are. We become partners, providers, protectors, or problem solvers. Later in life, a wise man begins to return to his true self, beyond roles and labels. He rediscovers simple joys, walking quietly, reading peacefully, sitting without speaking. And once he tastes this simplicity, he becomes careful about anything that might disturb it. Freedom then becomes an inner experience. It is the freedom to change without apology, to rest without guilt, to say no without fear. Some relationships, even loving ones, resist this freedom. They want consistency where life is asking for growth. A wise man understands that growth is non-negotiable. He chooses alignment over attachment. And yet, there is no bitterness in his heart. He does not carry grudges from the past. Instead, he carries gratitude. He understands that every relationship taught him something about patience, boundaries, forgiveness, or self-worth. Wisdom transforms pain into perspective. So when you see a man after 50 or 60 who chooses solitude over constant companionship, understand this: he is not escaping life. He is embracing it more consciously. He has learned that peace is not found by adding more people to life, but by removing what disturbs the soul. And in that quiet completeness, he discovers a relationship that never disappoints, the relationship with himself. Let me share a thought that often goes unnoticed. As time moves on, life gently shifts our priorities. In the early years, relationships feel like achievements. We believe that being needed means being valued, and being busy emotionally means being alive. But when a man crosses 50 or 60, if he has observed life carefully, he begins to see things differently. He realizes that life is not about how much you can hold on to, but about how lightly you can live. At this stage, many wise men start stepping back from relationships. And this choice is often misunderstood. People assume it is loneliness or disappointment. But wisdom is rarely loud. It does not announce itself. It quietly simplifies life. A wise man has already played many roles: partner, provider, caretaker, problem solver. Over time, he understands that constantly carrying emotional responsibility can become exhausting if it is not balanced with understanding. One important realization that comes with age is the value of emotional calm. Earlier, emotional ups and downs felt natural, even exciting. Now, they feel unnecessary. A wise man understands that love should not feel like emotional turbulence. If a relationship brings constant confusion, repeated misunderstandings, or emotional pressure, he chooses distance. Not because he cannot handle emotions, but because he has learned that peace is not negotiable. There is also a deeper awareness of personal boundaries. In younger years, we stretch ourselves endlessly to keep others comfortable. Later in life, a wise man learns that self-respect is also a form of kindness. He understands that saying no is sometimes healthier than saying yes out of habit. He becomes selective, not selfish. He chooses relationships that allow him to be himself without performance. Another quiet change is how time is perceived. Time no longer feels infinite. Each day carries value. Each peaceful moment feels precious. A wise man begins to ask whether a relationship adds meaning to his life or consumes his emotional space. He is no longer interested in fixing people or proving his worth. He has learned that not every bond is meant to be repaired, and not every silence needs to be filled. Solitude also transforms with age. What once felt like emptiness now feels like clarity. Sitting alone no longer feels uncomfortable. It feels grounding. A man who has learned to enjoy his own company stops seeking relationships out of fear of being alone. He understands that loneliness comes from inner emptiness, not from physical solitude. Despite this distance, his heart is not closed. It is simply protected. He carries warmth, compassion, and understanding, but without attachment that drains him. Wisdom teaches him appreciation without dependence. He respects love, but he does not chase it. So when a man after 50 or 60 chooses simplicity over complexity and peace over emotional intensity, it is not withdrawal, it is alignment. He has learned that the most important relationship he can nurture is with his inner calm. And once that relationship is strong, life feels complete, balanced, and quietly fulfilling, just the way it was always meant to be. Let me offer a reflection that comes not from theory, but from lived understanding. As a man moves through life, he gathers experiences the way a traveler gathers memories. In the beginning, everything feels urgent. Love must be intense, connections must be constant, and relationships must fill every silence. But as the years pass and a man reaches 50 or 60, something within him begins to soften. Not weaken, soften. He starts listening more and reacting less. Life no longer feels like a race, it feels like a journey nearing a scenic pause. At this stage, many wise men begin to step back from relationships, and this choice often confuses others. People assume it is fear or disappointment. But wisdom does not grow from fear. It grows from clarity. A man who has spent decades understanding people, emotions, and expectations begins to see patterns. He notices how often love is mixed with control, how care sometimes hides conditions, and how expectations quietly steal joy. One of the biggest changes that happens with age is the relationship with peace. Earlier, peace was something postponed, something to be enjoyed later, after success, after responsibilities, after settling down. Now, peace becomes the priority. A wise man understands that no relationship, no matter how meaningful, is worth sacrificing inner stability. If a connection disturbs his balance, he gently loosens his grip. There is also a deep respect for emotional energy. With maturity comes the awareness that energy is not unlimited. A wise man no longer wants to invest himself in emotional cycles that repeat without growth. He understands that love should feel supportive, not draining. If a relationship demands constant fixing, explaining, or proving, he steps back, not with resentment, but with acceptance. Another quiet realization is about fulfillment. In earlier years, fulfillment often came from being needed. Now, fulfillment comes from being aligned. A wise man no longer looks for someone to complete him. He has spent enough time alone to understand himself. Silence no longer scares him, it nourishes him. Solitude becomes a space for reflection, not emptiness. Freedom also takes on a deeper meaning. It is no longer about independence from people, but freedom from unnecessary emotional weight. Some relationships resist growth. They want the person you used to be, not the person you are becoming. A wise man understands that growth is natural, and he chooses environments where growth is respected, not resisted. Most importantly, wisdom removes bitterness from the heart. These men do not reject love, they honor it. They remember relationships with gratitude, not regret. They understand that attachment often creates suffering, while understanding creates peace. They have learned to care without clinging and to love without losing themselves. So when a man after 50 or 60 chooses calm over complexity and distance over emotional noise, it is not withdrawal from life. It is deeper participation in it. He has learned that the most lasting relationship is the one he builds with inner peace. And once that relationship is strong, everything else becomes optional, not out of loneliness, but out of completeness. Let me leave you with this thought. A wise man after 50 or 60 does not reject love. He refines his definition of it. Love, for him, is not possession, not constant validation, not emotional exhaustion. Love becomes calm, respectful, quiet, and sometimes the wisest relationship a man can have is with his own peace. Because when you are at peace with yourself, you are never truly alone. Thank you.